The arrow hit so hard it broke the silence. No gunfire, no shouting, just a dry snap like brittle wood cracking behind bone. The Marshal didn't scream, didn't even grunt. He just staggered forward one step, then collapsed face first into the red dust. The sun was already dying when she found him. He lay at the foot of her water barrel, one arm reaching up like he'd been crawling toward the sound of dripping, blood soaked through his blue coat. His badge was missing, his rifle gone. The shaft of the arrow still trembled faintly, pulsing with every fading heartbeat. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, broom still in hand. No one was supposed to come out this far. Her shack was off every trail, behind a ridge that only coyotes and regrets visited. Yet there he was, boots scuffed to the ankle, jaw clenched in rage, even unconscious. She didn't know him by face, but she knew the mark seared into his shoulder, visible where the coat had torn. A U.S. Marshal, and this land didn't forgive lawmen, especially not ones who bled. She stepped down slowly, not like someone rushing to help, more like someone walking up to a question they didn't want to answer. She crouched beside him. He smelled like iron and heat stroke. The arrow was deep, too deep to pull, barbed, not Comanche, not Apache. No, this was bounty hunter work. Sloppy, brutal, impersonal, the kind of shot that wasn't meant to kill clean. Just disable, drag back, collect. She brushed dirt from his lips. He flinched but didn't wake. She sighed, then did something stupid. She hauled his body over her shoulder like a sack of grain and dragged him inside. He was heavy, even unconscious, but she was stronger than she looked. Years of living alone make you that way. She laid him on the only real bed she had, hers, and started boiling water. The arrow stuck out like a black root growing from his spine. She lit a lamp, pulled out the tools needle, whiskey, bone saw, cloth, then paused. Her eyes drifted to the nail above her door where a dried lavender bundle still hung. She plucked it down and tied a single red thread from it. That thread would come back again. And again. But not yet. She cut his coat away. His body was a road map of old scars, knife cuts, rope burns, bullet grazes. But it was the fresh wound that held her still. Because as she leaned close, she saw something carved into the steel shaft of the arrow. A name. Marshal lied Walker. They wanted to make sure he died slowly. Make sure he saw what name was written on the thing that killed him. She whispered his name aloud. Walker. He stirred, eyes flickering open. Only for a second. Don't, he gasped. Then darkness again. She should have left him. She should have pulled the arrow the rest of the way in, not out. But something about his face, blood-streaked, dust-caked, made her stop. He didn't look like a symbol anymore. He looked like a man who had lost everything except the pain still chasing him. She poured whiskey down his throat and heard it hiss inside him like it met fire. Then she began to dig. Not into the earth, into his back. The arrow came out slow. She bit her own lip as she worked hard enough to bleed. But he didn't scream. Not once. When it was done, she dropped the bloody arrow into a tin can and kicked it under the bed. Then she sat on the floor beside him, covered in his blood, saw and cried. But only once. Only for a second. Then never again. Outside, the wind picked up. The dust around the shack lifted like ghosts made visible. And just beyond the last ridge of rock, 4 horses stopped to sniff the air. The bounty hunters weren't far behind. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the lamp, sharpening her knife, not for them, for him. Because if he lived, he'd have to choose who he was, Marshal, outlaw, or something in between. And until he did, she would keep that red thread now tied around the arrowhead as a reminder that even steel has a memory. By dawn, the desert turned to ash. The sun wasn't up yet, but the land was already waking buzzing flies, snapping brush. A coyote's cry half drowned in distance. Inside the cabin, she was kneeling beside the bed, hands steady, eyes hollow, threading a needle over a bowl of boiled water. The Marshal still hadn't moved. His breath rattled low, shallow. Blood crusted along his ribs like cracked varnish. She'd packed the wound with clean cloth, but the skin around it was hot. Infection wasn't coming. It was already here. She dipped the needle in whiskey, then flame, then steel met skin. And he woke. He didn't cry out, just reached instinctively for his gun. But it wasn't there, only her hand. Pressing his wrist to the mattress. "Easy," she said, voice flat, dry as dust. He blinked, eyes swimming. "Where?" "My shack." He tried to sit up. She pushed him back down. "I pulled the arrow," she muttered. Why she didn't answer. He looked around, saw the stitched curtains, the single shelf of books, her shotgun in the corner, a broom leaning against the door. Too clean for a criminal, too quiet for a townswoman, too strong for a widow. "Who are you?" he rasped. "No one worth shooting," she said, threading the needle again. She worked in silence, stitching the deep muscle, wiping the sweat from his forehead, rebandaging the back. She'd done this before. Not for lawmen, but for dying horses, bleeding coyotes, the occasional drifter who got too close to his own conscience. But none of them wore a badge. None of them had 5 digits carved into the wooden grip of their revolver, the numbers of the men they'd already put down. He followed her eyes. "You saw it," he whispered. "The badge," she replied. "No, I lost it," he said. Somewhere between guilt and survival. She raised an eyebrow. "You always talk like a preacher when you're bleeding." He smirked, then winced. She stood, walked to the window and looked out. Still no dust trail, no riders cresting the ridge, but she felt it. The weight of being hunted didn't ride up with noise, it rolled in with silence, a silence she knew too well. "They'll come," he said. "Let 'em," she answered. He blinked again. "Why'd you help me?" She paused, then pointed to the floor where the arrow had dropped. "I don't like seeing men killed by their own name." He frowned. "You mean the shaft?" She nodded. "You don't kill someone slow unless you want him to see himself die." He didn't speak for a long while. She boiled another pot of water, re-washed his hands, wiped dirt from under his fingernails, took off his boots. The leather peeled back, revealing feet bruised from days of running. "You walked far." He nodded. 3 days. "Alone since the shooting?" She turned. "What shooting?" He stared at the ceiling. Town called Caldo. Small. Dusty. Someone put a boy in the dirt. They blamed it on the old sheriff. Turns out, the sheriff was me. She narrowed her eyes. "You shot a boy?" "No," he said. But I didn't stop the man who did." She stepped back, sat in the rocker across from him. He was 14. He added, silence again. The kind that wasn't empty. The kind that held weight. She reached into the cupboard and pulled out a coffee can. Inside bits of metal. Thread. 2 buttons. A folded scrap of blue fabric. She shook it out onto the table and found what she was looking for, a small, bent brass badge. She walked over and placed it on the windowsill. "What's that?" he asked. "Yours now." He squinted. "So that's not no. It's not official. It's mine. Made it from a brooch years ago. Why? Because I wanted something to bury when my brother died." He said nothing. She looked at the badge. "I was gonna melt it down. But you didn't." "No." Why? She paused, then whispered. "Because I thought someday someone might earn it." He looked at the badge in the window, saw his reflection in it blurry, distorted. Not the man he once was, not yet the man he wanted to be. He closed his eyes and whispered something she almost didn't catch. "If I die here, don't bury me with it." And she, still standing in shadow, answered without turning, "I won't." The 3rd morning came with wind and grit. Dust crawled through the cracks in the walls like it had a mission, coating the floorboards, the table, even the Marshal's teeth. He spat into a tin cup and stared at the ceiling, face pale but lucid now, jaw clenched in defiance of the fever. The woman brought in water, cool, clean, from the well she'd dug herself. Still breathing, she asked. He nodded. Barely. She held out the cup. He took it with both hands, shaky but proud. As he drank, he noticed something. The badge she'd given him had been moved. Now it hung on a nail above the broken window. Not like a trophy, like a warning. The wind rattled the glass. The marshal set down the cup. You don't trust me? No, she said simply. He didn't argue. She began slicing potatoes at the table. Her knife never stopped moving. He looked around the room again. The shotgun was gone from the corner. She noticed him noticing. Relax, she said. I sleep with it now. He chuckled, then coughed. Good, he rasped. He tried to stand later that day. Got as far as kneeling before the world spun. She stepped beside him. Didn't offer her hand, just stood there until he gave up and sat back down. You don't like help much, he muttered. I've helped too many who didn't deserve it, she said. He looked at her. Think I'm one of 'em, don't know yet. He laughed again. Then something shifted. Tell me, he said. Quiet now. Why did you really stitch me up? She didn't look up. I told you. Because of the name on the arrow. You don't pull steel from a dying man because of a carved name. She paused, then lifted her shirt sleeve. There, just beneath her elbow, was an old scar, thin, clean, and deep. I was shot once, she said. Same kind of arrow. His eyes narrowed. You. She nodded. I was 16, helping my brother steal horses from the wrong camp. Someone fired. Arrow missed my heart by inches. He leaned back. Your brother, was he dead? She said. Years now. He closed his eyes. Was he a good man? She took a long time to answer. No, but he wasn't worse than the ones who hunted him. Later, as dusk fell, he called out to her. She came in, wiping her hands. He gestured toward the badge. You ever wear it? She smirked. No. Why not? Because you don't need a badge to know what's right? He nodded slowly, then said something she didn't expect. I remember a girl. She tilted her head. In Arizona Territory, border town, about 16, dark hair, bit wild. She froze. That girl. She had a brother. He added, he pulled a knife on my deputy. We chased them through the cotton fields. He looked at her now, his voice fading like the light. Was that you? She didn't blink, just whispered, maybe. Silence again. But it wasn't angry. It was ancient. Two ghosts, staring across a fire neither of them lit. She finally spoke. You didn't shoot me. No, but you chased us. Yes, and you didn't stop them. No, he said. I didn't. She stood, walked to the door. Outside, the wind picked up again. She didn't turn around, just said, at least now we're even. Then left, that night. He couldn't sleep. He sat by the broken window, staring out. The badge above his head twisted in the breeze, casting a bent shadow on the wall. And for the first time, he whispered to no one, I'm not the man I was. From the darkness behind him came her voice. Then stop pretending you are. Before he could respond, something brushed the floor. A thread of red tangled. Frayed had fallen from the lavender bundle above the stove. He reached down, picked it up, turned it in his fingers. In the morning, she would find it tied around the base of the badge nail. Not for decoration, but for memory. The morning smelled like old smoke and scorched metal. The marshal sat at the table, bandage red at the edges, chewing jerky like it tasted of regret. His revolver lay disassembled beside him, cylinder cracked, grip stained, but still salvageable. He polished each piece with care, as if fixing the gun might fix the man. She stood by the stove, back turned, ladling stew into a tin bowl. Neither had spoken since dawn, until she broke it. You remember the field? He paused, hand mid-wipe. The cotton, he asked. She turned. Yes. He set down the cloth. I remember the chase, not the faces. She placed the bowl in front of him. Then I'll help you. From her pocket, she pulled a photograph, creased, faded, torn at the corners. She laid it on the table between the bullets and the stew. 2 children, a girl in braids, a boy with wild eyes and a makeshift knife in his belt. That's us, she said. He stared at it. Long, hard. I don't remember. Dumb. He had a different name then. Took our mothers. Still, he blinked slowly, searching. He was 15, she said. Ran at one of your deputies when they came to drag me out of the house. His jaw tightened. You shot him in the chest. A stillness dropped between them. Not silent stillness, the kind that holds its breath. I never meant, he began. I don't want an apology, she interrupted. He looked up. I want you to see it, she said. See what wearing that badge cost. She pointed at the window. The badge still hung there, now with the red thread tied at its base. He followed her gaze, then whispered, I thought I was doing the right thing. Did you? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he didn't know anymore. She sat down across from him, folding her arms. I buried him alone. He swallowed hard. No shovel. Just my hands. A long pause. He was still warm. He looked away. She leaned forward, and you know the worst part. He shook his head. You didn't even look back. He stared at her now. What when it was done? When you left? You never once turned around. He stood suddenly too fast. Pain jolted his shoulder and he staggered against the table. She didn't help him. Didn't even flinch. He gripped the edge, panting. Then finally said, I don't remember because I couldn't. She raised an eyebrow. You chose to forget. No, he said. I forced it out. One day at a time. Drink by drink. Bullet by a beat. Because if I remembered everyone I didn't save, I wouldn't be here. She stared at him, then looked down at the photograph, ran her thumb over her brother's face. I used to believe in vengeance, she said softly. I used to think that if I ever saw you again, I'd gut you like a hog. He didn't move. But I didn't. She looked up. Because when I found you, you weren't a monster. You were just another body dying in the dirt. He lowered himself back into the chair, each motion slow, deliberate. Why keep me alive then? She leaned back. I wanted you to feel what I felt. What's that helpless? Outside, the sky darkened. A storm rolling in from the east, clouds thick with old thunder. Inside, the air was heavy, but something shifted. Not forgiveness, not peace, but understanding. She slid the photo back across the table. He looked at it again, then at her, and said, What was his name? She blinked. Say. He nodded, then whispered, I'll remember it. That night, as she washed his shirt in the basin out back, the wind lifted the photograph from the table and set it by the badge. She came inside, picked up both. And instead of burning either, she took a single red thread and stitched the boy's name into the collar of the Marshal's shirt, then folded it gently and left it at his bedside. The next morning broke in silence. No wind, no birds, just that weighty kind of quiet you feel before something breaks. Inside the cabin, the Marshal sat shirtless on the edge of the bed, staring at the folded flannel she'd left him. He didn't pick it up right away. He stared at the collar. His thumb brushed over it once, twice. There, stitched in red, small but deliberate, was the name S.I. He didn't know what moved him more, seeing it, or realizing it was meant to stay. Not a threat, not a warning, a mark. She didn't forgive him, but she'd sewn his memory into something he had to wear. He pulled the shirt on slowly, winced at the shoulder. When he stepped into the main room, she was already boiling water. Back turned, arms folded tightly across her middle as if they held something she didn't want to drop. He sat at the table and they didn't speak. She poured him coffee. The cup clinked, steam curled between them. Then she said, without looking, It fits. He nodded. Yeah. Long silence. Then she added, That thread was from my brother's blanket. He didn't respond, just drank, because he knew anything he said would make it worse. Later, they sat outside on the porch. He was still weak, but upright. She whittled a branch into a spoon. He watched the horizon. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you just run me off?" She didn't pause. "Because I don't run from ghosts." He exhaled slowly. "Am I that to you?" She looked at him now. "No, but you carry them." He met her eyes, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. In the afternoon, she took him down to the small garden behind the shack. Just a patch of struggling greens and tired soil, fenced by broken pickets and bones. At the far end was a cross made from driftwood. She knelt beside it, brushing leaves from the base. "This is where I buried him." He stayed back. "Did you mark it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because the land already knows." She placed a stone on the grave, then added, "But I want you to know too." He stepped forward, slowly, then bent, wincing, and placed the same red thread from his collar at the foot of the cross. "I can't undo it," he said. "No," she replied, "but you can stop forgetting it." That night, the wind returned. With it came the wolves. Not the kind with fangs, the kind with rifles and coin purses, but they weren't at the door yet. Only circling the edges of the land, sniffing, testing. He sat sharpening his knife. She boiled more water. This time, she brought him her old revolver. 5 shots, 1 misfire. "You might need it," she said. He didn't thank her. He just loaded it. Because gratitude wasn't the right language anymore. Action was before sleep, he asked. "If I live through this," she looked up, "what happens then?" She didn't answer right away, then said, "You stay on or you go, but you don't forget who you are now." He laid down again, this time beneath the window. Above him, the brass badge still hung. But now, a second nail held something beside it, a second thread, also red, also tied in a loop. But this one was frayed at both ends, unfinished, unresolved. She hung it after he slept. She didn't know why, only that she wasn't done yet. That night, a dog barked once in the distance, then a second time. Then silence. She walked to the door, shotgun in hand. He followed. In the distance, torchlight moved along the ridge, small, deliberate, controlled. She didn't say it. He didn't either. They both knew. Tomorrow, someone would die, and they would have to decide who they really were before that sun rose. They came just before dawn, not with paper, not with justice, just fire, hate, and the weight of unpaid grudges. 4 horses, 3 men. 1 lantern swinging like a threat in the blue morning mist. She saw them first from the porch, didn't scream, didn't run, just turned back toward the shack and said, "They're here." He was already at the table, loading rounds into the revolver she'd given him. Slow, mechanical, like a man not trying to win, just trying not to die small. They didn't wait. The first shot ripped through the fence, splintering wood like bone. She dropped flat. He rolled to the window, raised the pistol, and fired back just once. A cry from the ridge, then silence. Then another torch lit. They were flanking. He pressed his back to the wall, sweat glistening on his brow. His shirt, her brother's name stitched in red, clung to his skin like guilt. She stood in the corner, breath even, hands clenched tight around her shotgun. He glanced at her. "You still could run." She shook her head. "You still could surrender." He smirked bitterly. "I buried my badge yesterday, and then the front door cracked open and she stepped out, alone, holding a white cloth high." He moved to stop her, too late. She stood in full view, eyes locked on the man at the front of the riders. A scar ran from his chin to his collarbone. His hat sat low, casting shadow across a familiar sneer. "Jude Carver," she said. He raised his rifle slightly. "Missed me," he called. "You're not here for justice." "Nope." "You're not here for coin." "Nope." "Then why?" He grinned. "Because someone needs to remind the world what happens when you save the wrong man." Another shot. Missed. Deliberate. A warning, not a kill. Inside, the Marshal grabbed the rifle he'd hidden beneath the floorboards. 1 bullet chambered, barrel slightly bent, still enough to make a point. He burst through the side door, fired once. The lantern in Carver's hand exploded in flame. The horses reared, screamed, men scattered, and suddenly the desert was alive with gunfire. He took one in the shoulder, Norsum fell hard, rolled behind the trough, gasping. She ran toward him under fire, ignoring every bullet that split the sand beside her, threw herself beside him, pressing her hand to the wound. Not again, she hissed. He winced, twice in the same spot. That's gotta be bad luck. She laughed, breathless. You're terrible at dying. The final rider circled behind, took aim, didn't see her until it was too late. She rose, shotgun steady, and pulled both triggers. The blast knocked her back, but the rider didn't get up. And then there was silence again. Just smoke, blood, and the sharp whistle of wind. The sun rose over a burning fence. The shack stood, the grave still untouched, the badge in the window. Gone, fallen in the struggle, lying in the dust, cracked down the middle. But beside it was something else, the red thread, untied. Fluttering softly in the wind, he crawled back to the porch, bleeding, panting, laughing. You all right? He asked. She sat beside him, torn shirt, blackened hands, a cut across her cheek. I'm not the one full of holes, she said. He grinned. You stayed. She nodded. You fought. He looked out over the bodies, then down at the broken badge. I didn't fight for the law. She glanced at him. I know. They sat together, backs against the wood. She reached into her pocket, pulled out something folded tight. He opened it. A ribbon, red, faded, old. She didn't speak as she tied it around his wrist, careful, gentle. Not as a gift, not as forgiveness, but as a beginning. They buried the last body before noon. No ceremony, no markers, just a shared silence as they rolled the final man into the shallow pit behind the ridge. Buzzards hadn't come yet, but they would. The desert always remembers its dead. He stood there a while, hat off, hands covered in dirt and dried blood. The ribbon she tied around his wrist still clung there, now stained darker at one end. When he turned, she was already walking away. She didn't wait for thanks. She never had. Back at the shack, the damage was clear. The door had been shot through, 2 windows broken. The porch had new scars. 1 bullet had split the crossbeam above her brother's grave. She stood beside it now, head low. He approached slowly, kneeled beside her. It was never about me, he said. No, she whispered. It was about him. She nodded. He was just a boy, she said. And I forgot him, he replied. She looked at him, then reached into the soil and placed the broken badge, cracked and dust-covered, at the foot of the grave. I want him to keep it. He said nothing, then placed his palm beside hers and whispered, say. In the days that followed, they worked in rhythm. She hammered new planks across the porch. He cleaned the rifle, repaired the trough, chopped wood with his left arm, his right still bandaged tight. She didn't tell him to stay. He didn't ask to. But when he woke up on the 3rd morning and saw his saddle still leaning against the post, untouched, something inside him shifted. That afternoon she found him behind the cabin, shirtless, sweaty, digging. What are you doing? She asked. Planting. She laughed. Planting what we don't have seed. He shrugged. Corn, found a pouch under your shelf. She frowned. That's 5 years old. Then I guess it'll have to be stubborn. She watched him a long while, then stepped beside him, took the 2nd shovel, and helped. A week passed, then 2. He learned how to fix the roof without falling through. She let him cook badly. They spoke less, but understood more. And one day, without meaning to, he asked, What's your last name? She looked up from the sewing table. Walker, she said. He froze. That's my name. She nodded. My mother gave it to me. He blinked. She continued. I was born a Walker. My brother too. That name was never yours to begin with. He swallowed. Do you want me to change mine? She stared at him, then smiled. No, you earned it now. Later, she tied a new wind chime, trap springs, spoon heads, rifle shell casings. She strung it beneath the porch. At the bottom, one thing dangled. The red ribbon, now faded, but intact. When the wind blew, it sang. Not like mourning, like breath, like memory learning how to live again. The final scene was quiet. A passing rider stopped at the well. Asked him, "This your land?" He nodded. Name the Marshal, didn't hesitate. Lied Walker. The rider tipped his hat. "You the one who put down Carver and his crew?" He didn't answer. The woman stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. The rider tipped his hat again. "I heard about her brother," he said. "Then you heard half the story," the Marshal replied. The man nodded, then rode on. That night he stood by the fire, watching embers rise like tiny regrets that couldn't stay grounded. She came beside him, didn't speak, didn't need to. He held out his wrist, the red ribbon still there when she touched it, then whispered, "Now you carry him too." He nodded. Always, some burdens aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to be carried. In the West, where graves outnumber neighbors and silence is louder than law, justice isn't always delivered by gun or gavel. Sometimes it's stitched quietly into a collar, or whispered through a red ribbon passed from hand to hand. We want closure. We crave it. But what if the truth is heavier than apology? What if healing doesn't come with a clean slate, but with an open scar that we choose not to hide? This story teaches us that redemption is not something you ask for. It's something you live for. Every day, with broken tools and patched shirts, beside someone who sees the worst in you and lets you stay anyway. In the end, it's not about forgetting who you were. It's about choosing who you'll be. When no one's looking, if you're carrying something you think can't be made right, tie a thread around it and keep walking. You don't have to be forgiven to be human again. You just have to remember